Imagine waking up tomorrow morning and stepping outside your front door, only to find that your entire neighborhood, your entire city, your entire country has been compressed. Compressed until 176 million human beings are breathing the same polluted air, fighting for the same inch of road, dreaming on the same overcrowded patch of earth. Now imagine that this compressed, chaotic, suffocating place is simultaneously one of the fastest growing economies on the planet, that it holds the world's longest beach, that it shelters the world's most magnificent tigers, that the clothes on your back, yes, the exact shirt or jacket you're wearing right now, may very well have been stitched together there by hands that will never earn enough to buy what they make. That place is Bangladesh. And by the time this video is over, I promise you, the way you look at a clothing tag, the way you think about poverty, the way you understand human resilience, will never be the same again. This is Bat Globe and this is Bangladesh. 12 shocking truths that will change how you see the world. Let's go. Chapter 1. A country that shouldn't exist. And yet, here it is. Before we get into the facts, and trust me, the facts are going to shake you, we need to understand what Bangladesh actually is. Because most people in the Western world couldn't point to it on a map. And that invisibility, that's part of the problem. Bangladesh is located in South Asia, wedged between India on 3 sides and Myanmar to the southeast, with a southern coastline opening into the Bay of Bengal. It was born in 1971 through one of the bloodiest independence struggles of the 20th century, a war against Pakistan that killed between 300,000 and 3 million people, depending on which historian you trust. A war in which systematic atrocities were committed on a scale that the world, shamefully, quickly forgot. Out of that catastrophic birth emerged a nation that Nobel laureate Henry Kissinger infamously called a basket case, a country he believed had no future, no hope, no viability. He was wrong. Bangladesh didn't just survive, it became one of the most remarkable development stories in modern history, and one of the most heartbreaking contradictions the world has ever produced. Now, let's get into the facts. Chapter 2. The Population Density Crisis. 176 million people in a space smaller than Georgia. Let's start with the number. 1,265. That is the number of people living in every single square kilometer of Bangladesh. Not in the city, not in the urban core. On average, across the entire country, including forests, rivers, and rural farmland. To give you a frame of reference that might actually hit you emotionally rather than just intellectually, if the United States had the same population density as Bangladesh, America would be home to over 12 billion people. That's more than the current population of the entire planet, squeezed into one country. Bangladesh has over 176 million inhabitants, crammed into an area smaller than the US state of Georgia. Georgia, a state you can drive across in a few hours on the interstate. Now think about Georgia. Think about its open highways, its suburbs with yards and driveways, its national forests, its golf courses. Now delete all of that space, replace every inch with humanity, with babies crying, with teenagers studying by candlelight, with grandmothers cooking, over open fires in alleys barely wide enough to squeeze through sideways. That is Bangladesh. And here's what makes this even more staggering. This isn't ancient history. Bangladesh's population has more than doubled since 1971. In a single lifetime, your parents' lifetime. This nation absorbed tens of millions of additional human beings into an infrastructure that was already buckling. The result? Cities that weren't designed for millions are now holding tens of millions. Villages that fed hundreds are now feeding thousands. Rivers that sustained ecosystems are now highways for human waste. The population density crisis isn't just about inconvenience or crowding. It is the root cause of almost every other challenge this country faces. You cannot understand Bangladesh without understanding this number: 1,265 people per square kilometer. Burn it into your mind. Everything else follows from it. Chapter 3. The air you can't breathe. Pollution. So bad it's measured in cigarettes. Let me ask you something. Have you ever stood next to a smoker and felt that uncomfortable burn in your throat? That slight irritation in your eyes? Now imagine feeling that every single moment of every single day. Even when you're asleep. Even when your children are asleep. Even when you've never touched a cigarette in your life. That is life in Dhaka, Bangladesh's capital city. Dhaka consistently ranks among the top 3 most polluted cities in the entire world. The air quality is so catastrophically bad that scientists and health researchers have calculated that simply breathing in Dhaka is equivalent to smoking multiple cigarettes every day. Not one, multiple. The culprit is a microscopic particle called PM2.5. Fine particulate matter so small that it slips past your nose, past your throat, past every natural filter your body has evolved, and embeds itself directly into your lung tissue and bloodstream. The World Health Organization has set a safe limit for PM2.5 exposure. In Dhaka, that limit is regularly exceeded by 10, 15, sometimes 20 times over. What does this mean for real human bodies? It means children in Dhaka develop respiratory diseases before they develop permanent teeth. It means a healthy adult who moves to Dhaka and has never smoked a cigarette will show lung damage within months. It means life expectancy is compressed, robbed, not by war or famine, but by air. And what's creating this air? The answer takes us directly to the streets, the factories, and, uncomfortably, to the purchasing decisions of people in wealthy countries. Vehicles decades past their useful life clog every road, belching unfiltered exhaust. Brick kilns on the outskirts of cities burn coal and wood around the clock. Textile factories, and we'll come back to these in detail, emit chemical fumes that drift over neighborhoods like an invisible tide. Waste is burned in open piles because there isn't enough organized garbage collection to handle the volume. And flies, millions, perhaps billions of flies, carry disease from those waste piles into the street food markets, into the homes, into the lungs and stomachs of people who have no choice but to live alongside it all. The pollution crisis isn't just an environmental issue, it's a humanitarian emergency that happens in slow motion, invisible to the rest of the world every single day. Chapter 4. Transportation chaos and the limits of human endurance. If you've ever complained about a delayed subway or moaned about traffic on your commute, I need you to sit with what I'm about to tell you. And I need you to sit with it respectfully, because the people we're talking about aren't zoo animals or cautionary tales. They are human beings trying to get to work, to school, to the hospital, to their families. Bangladesh's transportation system is, by almost any measurable standard, one of the most chaotic, dangerous, and overwhelmed on earth. Public buses, the primary mode of transport for tens of millions of people, are often decades old, held together with improvised repairs and sheer mechanical willpower. They run on routes that were designed for a fraction of their current passenger load. During peak hours, the concept of full simply does not apply. People hang from open doorways, they balance on the roof. They press so tightly against each other in the interior that the act of breathing, actual oxygen intake, becomes labored. Not metaphorically, physically labored. Then there are the rickshaws, those iconic three-wheeled bicycle carriages that have become a symbol of Dhaka in the global imagination. They look charming in photographs. They are, in reality, a story of extraordinary and poorly compensated physical sacrifice. Rickshaw drivers, often thin men who have migrated from rural areas with nothing but their bodies as capital, pedal passengers through searing heat, through monsoon rains, through traffic jams that can freeze movement for hours. They earn wages that most people in wealthy countries spend on a single cup of coffee. Their knees and backs wear out decades before they should. And yet, hundreds of thousands of them show up every morning because the alternative, no income, is worse. But even the rickshaws pale in comparison to what happens on Bangladesh's trains. During peak periods, particularly around religious festivals or national holidays, the national rail network faces demand that it was simply never built to accommodate. The result is something that has to be seen to be believed. And even then, the mind struggles to process it. Passengers don't just fill the carriages. They climb onto the roofs of moving trains. They cling to the sides, fingers wrapped around whatever purchase they can find, bodies pressed against the metal exterior of a train, moving at speed. They do this not as a dare or an adventure. They do this because they need to get somewhere, and this is the only way. People have died doing this. People die every year doing this. And the trains still run, and the roofs still fill. Because for millions of people in Bangladesh, the risk of clinging to a moving train is more acceptable than the certainty of not reaching the destination. For pedestrians, crossing the street in Dhaka is its own form of extreme sport. Functional pedestrian infrastructure, overpasses, underpasses, properly timed traffic lights, is a rarity rather than a standard. In many areas, the flow of traffic is managed by police officers standing in intersections, directing a stream of vehicles, rickshaws, motorcycles, and pedestrians that never seems to slow. When the officer looks away, chaos reasserts itself instantly. This is the daily reality for millions of people who simply need to get from one place to another. Chapter 5. Street Food and Survival. The delicious, the dangerous, and the desperate. Okay, let's talk about food. Because this is where Bangladesh defies every dark narrative we've been building, and then immediately complicates it. Bangladeshi cuisine is extraordinary. This is not a polite thing to say to balance out the criticism. It is a culinary fact. The food of Bangladesh is a product of thousands of years of river delta living, Mughal influence, and South Asian spice tradition. It is complex, layered, fragrant, and deeply satisfying in ways that sanitized restaurant versions rarely capture. Pitha, steamed or fried rice cakes that come in dozens of varieties, each tied to a specific season or celebration. Fuchka, known elsewhere as pani puri, hollow dough spheres filled with spiced mashed potato and tamarind water, eaten in rapid sequence with a technique that takes years to perfect. Hilsa fish, so beloved it has effectively achieved the status of national icon, prepared with mustard seeds in a style that food writers have compared to the complexity of fine French cooking. The problem, and it is a serious, genuinely dangerous problem, is the conditions under which much of this food is prepared and sold. Street market stalls operate without running water, without refrigeration, without the food safety protocols that people in wealthy countries take as an absolute baseline expectation. Vendors wash their cooking utensils and cutting surfaces with water drawn from channels that run along the sidewalks. channels that also carry sewage, waste runoff, and whatever else flows through a city of millions without adequate drainage infrastructure. The water used to cook the food, to wash the vegetables, to make the sauces. This water is often untreated, contaminated, carrying pathogens that can cause cholera, typhoid, hepatitis A, and a range of other diseases that have been effectively eliminated from wealthy nations through infrastructure investment. And yet, millions of people eat from these stalls every day, not because they don't know. They know. They eat because it's affordable, because it's available, because the alternative is not eating. Because when you earn the equivalent of $2 or $3 a day, you don't have the luxury of food safety as a priority. You have the urgency of hunger as a reality. This isn't a failure of individual decision-making. It is the inevitable human adaptation to structural poverty. And understanding that distinction matters enormously. Chapter 6. Cultural practices that challenge assumptions. And what they actually mean. Here's where I want to slow down and ask you to do something difficult. Suspend judgment. Because we're about to talk about cultural practices that might seem strange or even shocking from a Western perspective. And the temptation will be to react with either ridicule or alarm. Resist that temptation. Because when you understand the why, these practices reveal something important, both about Bangladesh and about the assumptions embedded in your own cultural defaults. Eating with the hands, specifically with the right hand. In Bangladesh, as across much of South and Southeast Asia, using your right hand to eat is not a matter of lacking cutlery. It is a deliberate, meaningful choice rooted in both religious tradition and a philosophy of connection to food. Islamic tradition teaches that eating with the right hand is blessed. Beyond religion, there is a tactile wisdom to it. The temperature, texture, and consistency of food is communicated directly through the fingers, creating a different, more present relationship with the act of eating. Studies have suggested this may even improve digestion by stimulating sensory engagement before food reaches the stomach. It is, in many ways, more sophisticated than eating with metal tools, not less. Water instead of toilet paper. Again, context matters. In a country where toilet paper would consume a significant portion of a family's daily budget and where water is more available, quality issues notwithstanding, this is not a sign of underdevelopment. It is, arguably, more hygienic. Many health professionals would actually argue that water cleaning is more effective than paper. The visceral Western discomfort with this practice says more about cultural conditioning than it does about actual hygiene standards. These practices aren't curiosities to gawk at. They're adaptations, rational, often sophisticated adaptations, to specific economic and environmental realities. Remember that the next time you encounter something unfamiliar and feel the reflex towards superiority. Chapter 7. The Contradictions of a Muslim Society. Where faith and reality collide. Bangladesh is one of the largest Muslim majority nations on earth. Approximately 90% of its 176 million people identify as Muslim. Islam is not a peripheral identity here. It is woven into the architecture of daily life. The call to prayer echoes through cities 5 times a day. Dietary practices, social customs, gender interactions, business ethics, all are shaped by Islamic tradition. And yet, Bangladesh presents contradictions that challenge any simple narrative about Muslim societies. Adult entertainment is not just present in Bangladesh. It is legal. The country is home to one of the largest such industries in South Asia, with estimates suggesting approximately 100,000 women involved. But the statistic that stops every conversation is this: only around 10% participate voluntarily. The remaining 90% are there because of poverty so acute that it removes the concept of choice, because of family pressure, because of trafficking networks that exploit the desperation of women from rural areas who arrive in the city with nothing. Kandapara, a facility near the city of Tangail, is one of the largest of its kind in the country, housing an estimated 1,200 workers, though human rights organizations believe the true number is significantly higher. How do we hold these two realities together? A deeply devout Muslim society and an industry of this scale? The answer is uncomfortable. Religion does not exist in isolation from economics. Poverty does not defer to faith. When survival is the daily project, ideals, however sincerely held, are frequently overwhelmed by necessity. The situation is further complicated by Bangladesh's marriage customs. The country ranks in the top 10 globally for rates of child marriage, according to UNICEF. And the mechanism driving this is brutally simple: the dowry system. Unlike most of South Asia, where the groom's family pays the bride's family, a practice which brings its own serious problems, in Bangladesh, the bride's family pays the groom's family. And critically, the younger the bride, the lower the required payment. Think about what this creates. Families in poverty do a calculation. A young daughter is an asset that depreciates, or rather, one whose cost increases as she ages and gains education and independence. Marrying her young is, within the brutal logic of extreme poverty, financially rational. Parents aren't monsters for making this calculation. They're people trapped in a system that punishes them for making any other choice. When families cannot pay the required dowry, even the reduced rate for a young bride, the consequences fall on the girl. Reports of harassment, abuse, and abandonment of brides whose families defaulted on dowry payments are well documented by human rights organizations working in Bangladesh. These are not abstract statistics. These are girls with names and faces, and dreams that were never given the space to form. Chapter 8: Ancient Customs in Modern Times. The Mama tribe and the fight for young women's futures. In the southeastern hills of Bangladesh, in a region called the Chittagong Hill Tracts, lives a remarkable ethnic group called the Mama people, one of many indigenous communities in Bangladesh who have maintained distinct cultural identities, languages, and traditions for centuries in the face of significant pressure from the Bengali majority. The Mama are not Bangladesh's only indigenous group, but they are among the most studied for a practice that has drawn international attention, both for its cultural logic and its profound ethical problems. The practice involves widows who wish to remarry. According to Mama tradition, a widow seeking a new husband must choose a bachelor from the same tribe, a requirement designed to keep wealth and family networks within the community. But the tradition goes further. To compensate this new husband for taking on a widow, the woman must also provide one of her daughters to become the man's second wife simultaneously. A mother and her daughter, married to the same man at the same time. The community's justification centers on family structure and continuity. The daughter's presence provides the husband with the prospect of children. The mother retains social standing and authority within the family. When the mother eventually passes, the daughter inherits control of family assets, maintaining the lineage's economic continuity. From inside the cultural framework, this has an internal logic. From outside it, and increasingly from inside it, particularly among younger Mama women, it is recognized as a system that denies young girls any agency over their own lives, their own bodies, their own futures. The stories emerging from Mama communities in recent years have been quietly extraordinary. Young women who refused, women who fled, women who found allies in NGOs and human rights organizations operating in the Chittagong Hill Tracts who helped them access education, legal protection, and communities of support. Change is happening. It is slow. It is hard-won. Every girl who escapes this tradition does so against the weight of centuries of custom and the immediate pressure of family expectation. But they are doing it. And the international organizations supporting them, providing education, legal advocacy, and safe spaces, are making a difference that, while invisible to global news cycles, is immeasurable to the individuals involved. This is what real cultural change looks like. Not a headline, not a viral video. A girl, a decision, a different future. Chapter 9. Dhaka, the megacity nightmare and the human triumph within it. There are megacities on this earth that inspire awe. Tokyo, New York, Shanghai. Cities where the density of human ambition has produced architecture, culture, and infrastructure that feel like a collective achievement of the species. And then there is Dhaka. Dhaka is not that kind of megacity. It is something else entirely. Something that humbles every assumption about what cities are supposed to be and forces a reckoning with what cities actually are when resources are absent and need is overwhelming. With approximately 23 million people, Dhaka is one of the 10 most populous cities on the planet. It is larger than New York. It is larger than London and Paris combined. It grew to this size not through careful urban planning and infrastructure investment, but through a tsunami of rural migration, driven by poverty, floods, climate displacement, and the promise, often illusory, of factory work. The result is a city that was built for hundreds of thousands, now straining under the weight of tens of millions. Clean water is not guaranteed. Electricity is rationed. Waste management is overwhelmed. The streets carry more vehicles, more rickshaws, more pedestrians than any traffic system designed for human beings could reasonably accommodate. Air quality, as we've discussed, reaches levels that public health officials in wealthy countries would declare a state of emergency over. And in Dhaka, it is simply Tuesday. The minimum wage for garment workers, the backbone of the city's economy, and by extension, the global fashion industry, stands at approximately $95 per month. Not per week, per month. In a city where food, shelter, transportation, and basic healthcare all compete for that same $95. Most inhabitants earn even less than this. The poverty trap in Dhaka is not a metaphor. It is a mechanism. Low wages mean no savings. No savings mean no investment in education or health. No investment in education or health means limited access to better paying work. Limited access to better paying work means continued reliance on low wages. Round and round, generation after generation, while the city grows denser and the air grows thicker and the rivers grow darker. And yet, Dhaka is alive in a way that can stop your heart if you're paying attention. The tea stalls at midnight filled with philosophy students arguing about politics. The Eid celebrations, where 23 million people in a single city somehow, miraculously, celebrate together. The street artists, the poets, the mothers who wake at 4 a.m. to prepare food before factory shifts, then come home and study for night school certifications. The resilience here is not a comfort offered to tourists. It is a daily, deliberate act of survival that contains more dignity than most of us will ever be called upon to demonstrate. Conclusion. What Bangladesh asks of us. So, we've been through 12 facts about Bangladesh. And I want to be honest with you about what we've actually done here. We've looked at a country that contains all of humanity's contradictions simultaneously, in concentrated form. We've seen extreme poverty and extraordinary resilience, devastating pollution and magnificent natural wonder, global exploitation and local ingenuity, ancient customs being challenged by young women who deserve better, an economy growing at remarkable speed while most of its people wait for the benefits to arrive. Bangladesh is not a simple story. It is not a place to pity or to fear or to dismiss as a cautionary tale about overpopulation or poverty. It is a place where 176 million human beings, as complex, as ambitious, as funny, and heartbroken and hopeful as human beings anywhere, are doing the daily work of survival and building something out of almost nothing, while the world consumes what they produce and largely forgets to wonder who made it. Here's what Bangladesh asks of us. The next time you pick up a piece of clothing, in any store, at any price point, pause for a moment. Look at the label. If it says Bangladesh or Vietnam or Cambodia or any other country in the global south, consider the chain of human decisions and human costs that brought that garment to your hands. The brand that priced it, the factory owner who bid for the contract, the government that set the wage laws, the worker who stitched it under fluorescent lights for a wage that wouldn't cover your grocery run. Consider the system you participate in. Consider whether you're comfortable with it. You don't have to become an activist. You don't have to swear off affordable clothing. But knowing, really knowing, not abstractly but viscerally, is the beginning of something. It's the beginning of demanding better from the brands you buy. It's the beginning of supporting organizations working in places like Bangladesh. It's the beginning of voting for trade policies that include enforceable labor standards. Bangladesh is not a basket case. It never was. It is a country that has been carrying a disproportionate share of the world's burdens for decades, while producing a disproportionate share of the world's clothing and receiving a disproportionately small share of the proceeds. That's the truth about Bangladesh. And now you know it. If this changed how you see Bangladesh, or how you see the tag inside your shirt, tell me which fact hit hardest in the comments. I read everyone, and I mean that. If you want to go deeper on any of these topics, the Sundarbans, the garment industry, the floating villages, the ship-breaking yards, let me know what you want to explore next, because there is so much more to this story. Hit subscribe, turn on the notification bell, and we'll see you in the next one.